Hopefully, I should be in the process of going live. Unfortunately, I had some technical issues as I was logging in through Internet Explorer, and unfortunately, it didn't seem to like it. It wouldn't pick up the camera, and it wiped what I originally had booked in as an event. So I think that I am cross-posting across agents here to help and a few of the other fine and country operations that I work with. If anybody is out there and can see this live video and can let me know with either a like or a comment, I'd really appreciate it to make sure that I'm not just broadcasting to a blank screen, which I feel may possibly well be the case. This is actually my second ever Facebook Live video, and the first one didn't go particularly well. I was on a coast-to-coast charity expedition from the west coast of England across to the east coast of England, dressed as a Roman centurion, walking, carrying all of my kit on my back. We were aiming to do it for the Fine and Country Foundation. We were trying to raise money for homeless charities. We've got Alex who said hello, so I definitely am broadcasting, which is good news. So coming back to my Roman centurion story, we were trying to go coast to coast in 2.5 days, which is just over 90 miles. So it was some achievement. Sarah Spivey's just said hello as well. And I thought it'd be a really good idea to try and drum up awareness and sponsorship as we were coming into the finishing line to be able to do a Facebook Live video. Unfortunately, a complete amateur, having never done it before in my life. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was pitch black by the time that we got to the finishing line. It was in the middle of Wallsend. It's not a particularly well earmarked location, so it's quite difficult to see exactly where you are. And the chap that I was doing it with, I actually told him that we were closer to the finishing line than I thought that we were. And it transpires that even on the Facebook Live video, we missed the finishing live. So I looked a bit of a prize plum. And there's every possibility I might do the same again with this second Facebook Live video, but I'm going to do my best and I'll give it a try nonetheless. So Christian, who works with Base Property in London, he came up with a fabulous initiative to draw all of the estate agents together in the UK. And for us to create this initiative where we'd be able to give back to the greater community and to offer our help and advice in these difficult times. And he reached out to a few of the estate agents, and I was quite humbled to be one of them, saying, is there anything that we can do to pull together? And quite a few agents have shot a few Facebook Live videos, which they've published and broadcast, which are suitable for the general public and also for the estate agency industry as a whole. So Daniel Harrington's just said hello as well. Hi, Daniel. Thanks for logging in from Fine and Country. And I was quite humbled to be asked to be part of this. So it's something that I really appreciated, and a great initiative on his part. So I guess it's important to start with a bit of an introduction. My name is Jonathan Handford. I'm an estate agent, and I work with Fine and Country estate agents. Fine and Country is a brand with offices and a presence all over the world. We specialise in the sale of luxury property. We particularly focus on the upper quartile, so the top 25% of the market. I'm really proud to say that in my hometown of Royal Leamington Spa, we've sold 7 of the 8 most expensive residential properties. I'm personally worked as an estate agent for 20 years, and I'm a partner in 3 of the offices within the Fine and Country network in Leamington Spa, Stratford-upon-Avon and Droitwich Spa, covering the areas of Warwickshire and Worcestershire. In that 20 years, we've won lots of awards, including Best Overall Operator at Fine and Country out of the 300 offices, so I'm really proud of that. I also work as a coach and a trainer and an industry speaker, having delivered speeches all over the world, including a couple of trips to Sydney, Australia, to speak at ARIC, the Australasian Real Estate Conference. However, a large part of my time it's still spent at the coalface, because I love what I do. I've sold the most expensive property in Leamington Spa. I've sold the most expensive property in Warwick last year. And I think if it was just management and running offices, I don't think I'd do this job. I do it because I enjoy what I do. I like helping people move. I like involved in the moving process. Um, so that's a little bit about my estate agency career. But long before I was an estate agent, I was a carpenter. I was a chippy or joiner or whatever the street lingo is used in the modern day world. So for my living, I knocked in nails for a living. I'll confess, I'm a better estate agent than I ever was a chippy. My dad will tell you that as well because he's a joiner, a lifelong joiner. But I thought, using my experience from two different parts of the property sector, I thought it would be helpful to share some ideas and some thoughts around DIY for anyone that finds themselves locked down at home with disposable time on their hands right now. Um, in a lot of instances, providing that you do it properly, there are a number of benefits to tackling some DIY projects. It can add value to your property. It can improve your lifestyle at home. If you've got a nice property that's finished well, it's nice for your family. It's a good use of your time. Keeps you busy, keeps your mind focused, keeps you fit as well. Can give you a huge sense of achievement when you tackle a project and you get to see the finished work, especially if you see it every single day. And it doesn't have to be anything enormous either. Sometimes it can just be a small, a bird table within the garden that you can look out onto every day. It's just something to give you a bit of a sense of pride. And again, it's quite a proud moment when friends or family admire some of your work. Obviously, when they visit post-lockdown, because we won't want them to be visiting at the minute. So I've put together what I think are some of my top 20 tips. And then I can answer any questions that you might have at the end. I just thought that'd probably be the easiest way to keep this whole process a bit fluid. So I'd really appreciate it if you were to like, comment and share this video to make it as visible as possible. Wherever you can, if you can use the hashtag agents here to help. Again, I'm sure Christian would appreciate that in order to be able to get exposure for this initiative. So my first tip, do you need permission for something that you're doing? So certain types of properties in certain types of areas need special permissions for you to do work. For instance, listed buildings. So for every 100 properties that there are in the UK, 2% are listed buildings, either grade 1, grade 2 or grade 2 star. And listed buildings require special types of permissions, something called listed building consent. And it's actually a criminal offence to do work to a property that's listed without permission. And although the councils and the conservation departments will generally work with you, we do tend to find that it's better to get permission rather than forgiveness. And it doesn't have to be a listed building. Sometimes you might be in a conservation area, and external works to the outside of the building might require a certain permission. Again, if you're doing things like certain extensions, you might need planning permission. So stuff like that, it is always best to double check first before you go wading in and just cracking on and tackling a project, especially if it's going to be something significant. If they're decorative changes, you're generally going to be okay. I don't think you're going to encounter too many issues. But again, if you start to do things structurally, all of a sudden that's a slightly different dynamic. So a few more people saying hello. Matthias, hi there. Robert Smith, Gareth Love, Marie Pierre Fritz, Yvette Sanderson Stevens without the wig. That's a separate thing that we're doing with the daily dose of positive news. So in terms of permissions, there are certain works that you can do, providing that you're not in a conservation area or in a listed building, where you have a legal right to make certain changes to your property. And this was passed by the Country Landowners Association. They lobbied Parliament for it. It's something called permitted development rights. And they're a legal right for you to make changes to your building. For instance, you can build a shed within your garden providing it doesn't exceed a certain height, providing it's a certain distance from boundaries, and you can just go ahead and do that without the necessity to get planning permissions. So you can look online and understand exactly what you can do with permitted development rights. There are even certain extensions that qualify. Things like a loft conversion you can do, but again, just double check, because there are still some criteria which make it sit within permitted development rights. And again, you don't want to sit outside of that. So a few more people logging on, which is great. So my top tip number 3, bear in mind that some jobs that you do are going to need specialist contractors. So don't undertake works that need to be completed by a recognised professional and then also signed off, especially if you're thinking of selling the property and trying to maximise value at a later date. Lots of work will require a certificate when it comes to selling the property. For instance, if you're doing things like doors and windows and external things, you're going to need a fencer certificate from a fencer certified contractor to fit them. If you haven't got that fencer certificate, the buyer's solicitor at the point of sale is going to flag that up, and that's going to create a problem for you. You're either going to need to get one retrospectively, or you're going to need some form of indemnity policy in order to be able to get it passed. Again, I wouldn't encourage anybody to go and do this, but just to make it abundantly clear, electrical work to the property, don't go start fiddling with fuse boxes and things like that. Get a qualified spark, a qualified electrician in to undertake those works. You're going to need an electrical certificate when it comes to selling the property, so you're going to have to get somebody in to sign this off anyway. Even if you're relatively competent or comfortable, it is something that you're going to want to consider getting a specialist in. Exactly the same thing when it comes to gas engineers and boilers or oil boilers. You're going to need a professional to sign off any works to those sort of units. And again, you're not going to be able to sell the property without it. So as ambitious as you may be, even if you feel comfortable to be able to tackle it, actually, you're not going to be able to convince a solicitor acting for a buyer that those works have been done to a certain competency and standard. So you're probably best to wait or turn to a specialist contractor. And also, some of the works that you do might dovetail in with one of those specialist contractors, and you might want to go ahead and do certain things, i.e. refitting a kitchen, but actually if you need a gas engineer to move a boiler or something like that, you've got to make sure that you can coordinate between the two of you. And I guess that ties in nicely with point number 4, which is health and safety. Make sure that you have the relevant safety equipment for the job. You might not need to conform with standard site health and safety in terms of wearing a hard hat or high-vis jacket or things like that. But actually, if you're an amateur, make sure that you don't go hurting yourself. There are other ways that you can put unnecessary pressure on the NHS other than just going out or meeting family members or leaving yourself vulnerable to COVID-19. You can lob a finger off with a crosscut or with a skill saw, or you can get a splinter in your eye or something like that, or you can pour something corrosive on yourself or splash something in your eyes. So make sure that you've got the necessary health and safety kit: boots, gloves, eye protection. If you've got children knocking about the house, make sure that they don't end up hurting themselves, picking up a Stanley knife or putting their hands in a cement mixer or something. So there are other ways that you can put unnecessary pressure on the NHS and make sure that you're not one of those people. And I've seen so many accidents on sites when I was a chippy, when I was younger. It's so easy for somebody to make a mistake. I've seen experienced craftsmen. My cousin once cut off his thumb literally to the base, and it was one of the most horrific things that I've ever seen, and it was a momentary lapse in concentration. And again, if you're not a professional, if you're not used to doing this, it can be really easy for you to make a mistake along those lines. So just be incredibly health and safety conscious. I know we're a bit overboard in the UK with it, maybe in comparison to other countries, but actually we've got a good record and a good track record with safety for those exact reasons. And a lot of those things can be preventable. So just try and be sensible. Work within your capabilities. work within your skill set, your knowledge, your physical strength, and also your tools. So that's tip 5, work within your capabilities. It's important to understand your limits before you start ripping anything out. Once you commit to a job, i.e., you rip a kitchen out with a view to putting a new kitchen in, you're not going to have a kitchen. If then all of a sudden you realise that you don't have the tools and the materials that you need in order to be able to refit that kitchen, you're going to be without a kitchen. Or if you injure yourself halfway through, you're going to be without a kitchen. And no matter what project it is that you're doing, if you move one of the children out of their bedroom to redecorate it, and then all of a sudden you find that you can't get the materials that you need in order to be able to finish that job, you're either then going to be wasting a lot of time moving everything back in, or you're going to be moving them back into a half-finished job, or leaving them out for a period of time where they're maybe going to get frustrated. So I appreciate you might not necessarily know your capabilities, but just then maybe start small, and we'll come back to that, I think, a little bit later on in terms of another tip. So point 6, I would say, start with a list. So it's interesting. Whenever I put a property to the market, I'm a huge advocate in home staging. It's something that's much more abundant in America and Australia than it is here in the UK. But I'm a huge advocate of it because I think it's really important to get the house looking its absolute best. And I've done this for years. If there is a vendor that's thinking of selling, it's not just about what I need to do with the marketing. The vendor also has a commitment to get the property looking their absolute best. So I will literally go around and I will create an inventory of everything that needs doing to that property in order to get it looking its absolute best. And I will go into finite detail. I'll even look at things like doing an inventory of room by room. And as I go to each room, I will list the things that catch on the handles, the hinges that aren't right, drawers that don't close properly, if there's light bulbs that are blown, if there's a part of the blind that's not working properly, if the curtain's not hanging right. Literally, I'll create an inventory of everything that needs doing, no matter how big or small. Now, once you've done that inventory and you've broken it down room by room and then also done the outside space, you can then, and if there's 10 items in a room, score them from 1 to 10 in terms of what's the easiest and what's the most difficult. Now, Brian Tracy wrote a great book called Eat That Frog, which is you should tackle the most difficult thing first, the biggest and the ugliest frog. Actually, when it comes to DIY, especially in instances where maybe you're a bit of an amateur and doing it for the first time, I would say the opposite is true. Start with the little victories, the small little wins, the things that are relatively easy for you to tackle and get done. Changing a light bulb is pretty straightforward. You're maybe going to need a set of steps, but you can turn that around relatively quickly. It might be a case that the most difficult thing to do is hanging a set of shelves or rehanging a door. Again, get everything else done first, and then get a bit of flow and momentum, and then all of a sudden you can then tackle some of the bigger jobs. So I'd start with a list, work out what's the most difficult, what's the easiest things, and then start to build momentum and tackle those things, and you'll start to get into a bit of a swing of things. So tying in with that, point number 7 is start small with your projects. It is difficult to gauge exactly just how long it's going to take to tackle a project quite often until you start the work. If you've got no experience of doing it, if you're not in the trade, if you're not a professional, it is really difficult to say. And even if you do a lot of good research in advance, and you work out by referring to professionals or people in the trade or family members, you are going to encounter things that are going to create more work in the process, which is going to extend the length of time that job is going to take. I'll give you a great example of this. I'm landscaping here at home, and it's quite a big space to be able to tackle. It's over 100 square metres of just the lawn. That doesn't include the patio. And as part of the project of doing it, I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I can work 60 70 hours a week as it is, and then trying to tackle a landscaping project in the garden at home on the weekends is somewhat challenging. And I remember one weekend I was excavating, I put a huge flight of steps down to a public footpath at the back end of the garden. And as I started to excavate the ground to put the sleepers in, I found what could only be described as a beach ball size of concrete with a metal pole in it. Now, to this day, I still don't know who put that there or what purpose it served. I can only assume it was part of a fence. So Joanna Osborne's just commented and put, projects always seem to take so much longer than I anticipate. My wife despairs because I say, yeah, I'll have that done this afternoon. And 2 days later, I'm still working on it because I've spent an hour walking around in circles on a mobile phone. So, Joanna, I feel your pain. But this one instance of this beach ball size of concrete with this huge metal rod, and at the time, I didn't have a huge big pneumatic drill to break this thing down. There was no way that I was going to be able to lift it out, and I couldn't physically finish the project that I needed to do to put these sleepers in because I had this huge big cement ball that I needed to get rid of. So no matter how good a job you can do of making a provision, there are going to be things that are going to make it a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult for you. So the smaller that you start with your projects, the smaller the obstacles that you will face, and the more you will get finished and the more you will get accomplished, and then it's easier to be able to build up and tackle the bigger things. So tying in with what I said about research, spend as much time researching your project as you do in the implementation. So I'll say that again, spend as much time researching your project as you do in the implementation. There's an old adage that carpenters use, which is measure twice and cut once. And again, that's still ingrained in me to this day. Whenever I take a measurement, I'll take a measurement, I'll walk away to a saw or to a crosscut or something like that, and it's habitual. I'll go back and I'll take the measurement again before I make the cut, because it's just so much easier than trying to do it the other way. And you'll flush out any problems or misinterpretations, and occasionally 1 in 10 you'll think, no, I got that wrong the first time, and then you'll make sure that you get it right moving forward. So the more time that you spend online researching, thinking about your projects, working out what you do, doing a quick sketch and a quick drawing, mapping out where your fixings are going to be, what materials you're going to use, the easier it will be. A bit of time spent in planning will make all the difference when it comes to implementation. So just do as much research as physically possible, and there's some great sources of information out there. It's so easy to be able to revisit. So point number 9, is it worth you doing? Weigh up the cost of investment, tools, materials and time as to whether it's worthwhile doing or not. So for instance, if you have a limited set of tools, if you wanted to go ahead and build yourself a shed at home in your garden, there are a lot of things that you're going to need in order to be able to make that happen. You're going to need a barrow, you're going to need levels, you're going to need drills, drivers, you're going to need extension leads, you're going to need hammers, you're going to need all sorts of kit in order to be able to do that. Now, the materials to build the shed might be £400 or £500, but you might need to put aside £500 to £1,000 for materials to buy all of those bits to do the rest of them. So you've got to weigh up now, if you're a first-time homeowner and you enjoy DIY and you're planning on doing loads of stuff over the next 20, 30, 40 years, then actually that investment in those tools will be spread across the course of other projects. But if you're literally thinking of just doing the one, Damien's just stepped in and said, "Shed completed. Good effort, mate." If you're going to spread the cost of those tools over lots of other projects, then it's a worthwhile exercise. But if you're thinking of it just as a one-hit wonder, it might not be worth you doing it. And again, tools aren't cheap. And again, when it comes to buying tools, buy cheap, buy twice. And I think that you buy that's like a bit of a cheap thing probably isn't going to last, and it's not going to do the job that you need it to. So try and work out, is it worth you doing, and try and weigh up all of the extra costs rather than just the materials. So 10, how long will you need to complete your project? So I think this is really important. And again, I don't know if it's wishful thinking on my part. We don't know when the movement ban is going to be lifted. I would imagine it's probably going to be until the end of April and into May, but we just don't know. If you step into a 2-week project and after 7 days the movement ban is lifted and you need to go back to work, what's going to happen at home with your unfinished project? Is it then going to sat there unfinished over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks as you catch up at work? So try and work out worst case scenarios in terms of getting your project completed and finished. Have you got enough time in order to be able to do it? Family project, number 11, providing it is safe to do so, get the family involved. Delegate jobs. It can be a family affair. It can be a liberating and fulfilling experience, getting everyone together. Everyone might be biting each other's heads off at home at the minute, living in Groundhog Day, doing the same things over and over. Actually, a family project where you all embark together on achieving something could pull everybody in the same direction. I live at home with my wife and a 3-year-old. I've literally had that 3-year-old carrying a wheelbarrow from the front of the house, through the garage, through the utility, into the garden and down a ramp. It was worrying the first 3 or 4 times that he did it, but actually he started to embrace it and he's at my feet and you can see that he's getting involved. I've had him picking up stones. I've had him carrying little bits of cement over in a trowel to me, and just sort of delegating jobs to him. And actually it's been quite fun. And if he was a little bit older, I could maybe even get him using a few more tools and things like that. So rather than everybody working in isolation from each other, actually all pull together and do something together. And staying with that, I think this is important. Hi, Lisa. I think staying with that, this is really important. You need to align your thinking as a family. I have a very forgiving wife, and I've left the house in some horrendous states over recent weeks, as I've literally finished a long day working on stuff, and I haven't had time to put all of my tools away. And I know that I'm going to get straight back on it in the morning as soon as I wake up again. And providing that you don't live with an absolute clean freak that's prepared to take it on the chin and live with a little bit of mess whilst you're trying to function and work and operate. But just make sure that whatever your list of jobs are, that you're in agreement in terms of what the priorities are. You don't want anything as a catalyst for potential divorce plans moving forward. Hi, Emma, Jane Ford, good to see you. Thanks for logging in. 13, it won't go to plan. I've said this earlier, you've got to be prepared for mistakes to happen. Be prepared for things to go wrong, for you to hit obstacles in the journey. The military use an old adage, no good plan survives contact with the enemy. I think in DIY, no good plan survives contact with you starting the process and finding out that you run out of materials, or you hit something in a wall that you didn't intend to do, or one of your tools breaks, which renders the project a bit redundant. So you've got to kind of make an allowance for mistakes to happen and take that in your stride. There's got to be a contingency there for time, cost, materials, and for other things where you will fall short. No matter how good your planning is, and I know builders get a lot of stick, but actually they work in an environment where things go wrong all of the time. So tip 14 is tools, and I've touched on this already. Make sure you have all of the tools that you need before you start. And this isn't a case at the minute where you can just nip round to one of your neighbours or a family member and borrow them, because obviously you should be applying social distancing rules. So really, anything that you need for the project, you should already have. Now, there are still companies that are open where you can pick up new tools. You can order things online and get them delivered. Again, we've had stuff within the last couple of weeks where delivery drivers have left stuff on the drive, taken a photograph and then stood back at a distance. So you can still order in the things, but what you won't be able to do is start a project in the morning, realise that you haven't got the tool by midday, and then run out and go and pick one up. Hi, Margarita. Thanks for logging in. Good to see you. Got a home stager there that's watching us. We did an international think tank on home staging a couple of weeks back, so good to see you. You missed my bit where I said about being an advocate of home staging. So tip 15, materials. Make sure you have all the materials that you need before you start. At the minute, not everything is readily available. So, for instance, and again, I'm still part of a few builders forums on social media. I can't help myself. I feel like I'm drawn to those. I think I miss the banter between the lads, to be honest. But I've seen instances of plaster at selling 10 times its normal price. So a bag of plaster selling at 10 times its normal price. So there are still materials, but not all of the builders' yards are open. I've seen instances where DIY.com, which is B&Q, there has been a queue to get onto the website because so many people are at home. The demand has been so high that you've had to wait 5 or 10 minutes just to be able to have a place to peruse and look around the website. So don't make the assumption that you're going to be able to get everything that you need. Check in with the builder's yard first, try and order everything at the same time, and you maybe might want to wait till all of the materials have been delivered before you get started. So again, as part of this gardening project, the landscaping project at home, I needed MOT Type 1 sub-base. And the normal places that I would go to, there's a big quarry called Bartlett's, and it closed for 2 weeks. So I put a message out on social media, and thankfully somebody stepped up to the plate. And later on that afternoon, I had a delivery. So you can always use social media to try and find the materials that you need, but just make sure that you've got everything that you need and that you've taken a delivery before you start doing things such as your rip out. So top tip 16 is YouTube. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but YouTube is a limitless resource of information in terms of how to do things. I'm pretty sure if you could get your hands on some yellow cake uranium, you could probably build yourself a nuclear weapon with instructions on YouTube. But there is literally a video for absolutely everything. So be it hanging a shelf, hanging a door, there is some incredible tips. Decorated. To many, this will be the low-hanging fruit, which is they think, well, actually, you don't need massive tools, you don't need loads of materials in order to be able to do it, and it's pretty straightforward in order to be able to do this. Now, the reality is that decorating looks easy, but actually, it's quite a skill. Especially to do it properly. And in terms of adding value to your property, actually what you don't want to do is detract from the value of your house by doing a bad job, especially with that final aesthetic. So again, follow a few YouTube videos in terms of the best ways to do it. Start small, start with the smallest room rather than the biggest one or the one that you want to tackle first. So then you can actually get your flow and your momentum to make sure that it's absolutely right. But like I said, decorating is a skill. It requires a lot of patience to do it correctly. Make sure you strip everything down to get it looking its absolute best. 18. My next top tip is for a lot of the jobs, you've got to be physically fit. So any office and desk dweller that makes the jump into a labour-intensive job will soon find aches and muscles that they didn't know that they had. And even as an ex-joiner myself, if all of a sudden I've been working in the office for a few weeks and then I'll tackle a landscaping project at home for a few days, my back knows about it, my hips know about it, my neck knows. So you make sure that you have got the correct level of fitness in order to be able to tackle what it is that you're hoping to tackle. And actually, this is a reflection of my age and the fact that I've probably just passed 40. Actually make a provision for having a stretch out at the end of the process, just to make sure that you're up and mobile again the next day to be able to get back and tackle the project. So 19, don't double up on work. Make sure that your workspace is protected. So dust sheets, be it just rags, be it plastic covers. Make sure that you don't go and spill a paint pot on your carpet and end up having to rip up a carpet and replace that. Again, protect floors and things like that. Just make sure that your workspace is all protected. You're not dragging old nails across a nice wooden floor or something like that. The job will take longer to do repairs than it will be to spend the 5-10 minutes getting the room space prepped. And also, it might be tempting to just work around the furniture that's in there. But if you're doing things like decorating, move it all to the middle of the room, cover it and wrap it, and then do everything that you need to do. That little bit of time that you spend in preparation, again, will save you hours in the total. So top tip 20, what adds the most value? So this is such a wide-reaching question. It has so many variables to answer inaccurately, subject to what type of property you're in, subject to what condition the property is, subject to what your skill set is and your experience and your knowledge in terms of DIY. But putting all of those things aside for a second, as an estate agent, the one thing that I can tell you that doesn't necessarily add value but detracts from value is maintenance. So nothing will give a buyer or a surveyor acting for a buyer more leverage than a property that is badly maintained, because it will give them that leverage to be able to come in and renegotiate. So in terms of adding the most value, I would say the counter to that is what can you minimise in terms of negotiation. So get things done that are maintenance issues. Gates hanging badly, drawers that don't shut, fence panels broken or leaning, broken guttering, downpipe without falling off the roof, things like roof tiles that aren't fixed properly. So all of those things, again, they can protect the value of the property rather than adding. The obvious thing for adding values are kitchens and bathrooms, and they're going to have a huge impact. But I wouldn't expect an amateur to start tackling things like kitchens and bathrooms. It's such a big project, and subject to you being in a lockdown and living at home, I don't think your family are going to appreciate you ripping out a kitchen, taking away your ability to be able to cook and prepare food for the family or clean, with no end in sight in terms of being able to get those things back on track again. So I probably wouldn't recommend those things, especially if you have got other low-hanging fruit such as decoration, repairs, maintenance that you can get your teeth into. So in terms of some bonus tips, Pinterest is a great source for ideas and inspiration. You can create a bit of a pin board. You can search for different topics. A spring clean and cleaning the house rather than repairing it can have just as much of an impact in terms of property value. Think about storage and stowing stuff away that you don't need or has maybe become redundant. It will give you no end of space. Vacuum seal bags to reduce the storage space need and free up valuable storage space in your home. So I think that's pretty much it. I was going to try and go for around 30 minutes and I've been talking for about 40 minutes now. I am going to give everybody the opportunity to ask a few questions. I think I've gone through everything, unless there's anything that anybody specifically got to ask me. No, I think that is everything. I'm going to put here as a comment myself my email address. If anybody does have any questions, anything that they need to know, anything that I can help with, please drop me a line in the future. I'll give you my mobile number there as well. 07813 787 474. You've got my mobile number there as well if anybody needs to reach out to me. I hope that you've found this useful. A phone call away if you need anything. Christian, thank you for the invitation to do this. I hope it's been useful for everybody. If you do tackle a DIY project, make sure you stay safe and don't be another statistic with the NHS in an accident emergency waiting room. So good luck. Maybe send me pictures of your completed DIY projects and have a good one. Thank you very much.